My name is Geraldo. I am 78 years old, and before time silences me for good, I need to tell this, even if it is to no one, even if it is just to this silence that accompanies me every night, when the Normandy wind passes through the cracks in the window and seems to whisper her name, just to remind me of what I have lost. I lived for 30 years in a forgotten village in France, a beautiful place, too beautiful for so much hidden pain. I woke up early, made bread from the local bakery, mixed flour with hope, and came home smelling the rosemary she left on the sheets. I was a baker, yes, but I thought my mission was to feed that house with love. Warm love, like bread fresh from the oven, constant love, like a batch of bread baked in the early hours of the morning. But she cooled down, and I grew lukewarm without realizing it. The coffee I made every day at 6 went untouched. The goodnight kiss turned into a nod, and one day, without warning, without shouting, without scandal, she just changed my name to his. A young man, clean-shaven, young body, fresh voice, a man who could be my son, or worse, her lover. And when I, with eyes full of years, asked for an explanation, she said that phrase that still tears my throat when I try to sleep: "You should thank me for staying with you for so long." Gratitude. She wanted gratitude, as if love were a debt, as if sleeping under the same roof for 4 decades was a favor. And there, at that moment, burned in the oven, and so did I. To this day I remember the taste of the cold coffee I drank that morning, sitting alone on the porch, waiting for a phone call that never came. Not from the children, not from her, not from anyone. Sometimes we only start dying when we stop telling the truth, and it was in that silence that everything began to fall apart, even though no one saw it, because an old man's pain doesn't scream, it hides deep in his eyes. And now that I'm no longer afraid of being forgotten, I'm going to tell everything, because maybe, just maybe, someone will listen. I almost didn't have the courage to tell her this. I stayed silent for years, swallowing each tear with a sip of cold coffee, trying to pretend it didn't hurt when she looked at me as if I were just an old piece of furniture in that house. Every time she was silent, every night without a word, I told myself it was just time, just tiredness. But it was rejection. It was disguised. Abandonment. And today, after everything, I'm trying to talk. I'm trying to share this weight that's been stuck in my chest for decades. And the truth is that I'm scared. Scared of saying everything and no one listening. Scared of opening up about my pain and remaining invisible. So please show me that I'm not talking alone. Leave a like, stay with me until the end of this story, because there are still things inside that I've never had the courage to tell, not even to my family. And now I'm going to open up about everything, even if it hurts, because there are truths that only grow old when they're not said. And today, I want to open my heart to you. She was 22 when she came into my life like a spring wind, light, sweet, and impossible to hold. I, at 26, already had cement-marked hands, sunburned skin, and my heart was full of thirst. But it wasn't thirst for freedom, no. It was hunger for someone to return to. I remember exactly the first time I saw Madeleine. It was a sultry afternoon in Lyon. I was leaving the construction site and going to buy bread at a bakery hidden on the corner of Rue du Mars. She was behind the counter, wearing a white blouse with rolled-up sleeves, her hair tied back in a messy bun, and a shy smile that didn't last more than 3 seconds. A short smile, but genuine, like a promise of rain in the summer. That afternoon, I took the bread and decided to buy a sweet that I didn't even like. I went back the next day, and the next and the next. I always found some stupid excuse to see her. Even the baker noticed, "You're not eating all that, you're in love." I laughed, embarrassed. But it was true. In a short time she became my favorite routine. We got married 6 months later. It was a small wedding with just 2 of my friends and an aunt of hers who was always complaining about rheumatism. She wore a light blue dress that she had sewn herself, and her shoes were borrowed. But that day, she walked like a queen. And me? I looked at her as if I had found a piece of heaven fallen to earth. We rented a small townhouse on the outskirts of Caen, in Normandy. It was a simple house, but it had a backyard that smelled like childhood and windows that let the sun in like a blessing. We didn't have much, a bed, a stove, a refrigerator that made more noise than it cooled. But I felt rich, because she was there, because I had someone to say I'm home to at the end of the day. I worked as a bricklayer for the first few years. Then I got a steady job in a bakery. I would wake up at 4 in the morning, my body heavy with fatigue, but my chest light, because she always left me my coffee brewed with a silly note next to it. Today's pie will be apple pie, or don't forget to buy vinegar. I kept the notes in a box. I never had the heart to throw any of them away. Life had color, even when it rained. I remember the smell of the dishcloth she left drying on the window. I remember the sound of the kettle whistling as she sewed with her glasses askew on her face. I remember the taste of the stew she made when she knew I was sad, even when I told her I was okay. She had a gift for reading my silence, at least at first. On Sundays, I liked to come home dirty from work, with rough hands and sore feet, and find her wearing an apron, taking the cake out of the oven. The house smelled of vanilla and home, and I thought that was love, real love, the kind that lasts. I made plans, lots of them. I dreamed of children, long dinners, white hair by her side. I worked overtime. I took on odd jobs at the supermarket. I sold my father's watch to pay for a better bed, and I never let anything go missing. Never. Not bread, not shelter, not respect. But now, looking back, I realized that maybe I loved for two. Maybe I filled the house with everything except what she wanted. Or maybe she emptied herself and never told me. And I, blinded by love, didn't want to see, because there was a time when the tickets disappeared. The coffee started to get cold in the pot. The kettle still whistled, but there was no more cake, just a thicker, colder silence. And I started to feel that something was moving away. But I kept quiet, because the fear of losing is worse than the pain of pretending. I remember one night, it was winter. It was snowing outside, and she sat on the couch wearing a coat I had never seen before, a strange perfume. I sat next to her, tried to touch her, and she said, "I'm tired." 2 words, so short, but they went through me like a hot knife. That day, I went to sleep with her scent on my pillow and a pain in my stomach that wasn't hunger. It was a premonition, and you know what was worst? I still thought it was my fault. I worked harder, I bought flowers, I made dinner. And her? She smiled, but her eyes weren't smiling at me anymore. They were smiling somewhere I couldn't reach. And yet, I continued, because those who learn to love by serving also learn to endure in silence. She made coffee, but stopped asking if I wanted sugar. She started going out more. She came back late. She said it was her sewing class, that she had made a new friend. And I believed her. Because when the truth hits, our hearts are already too full to bear it. And that's how I built my life together, brick by brick, day by day, believing that she was also there with me, side by side, building bricks together. But maybe she was just leaning against the wall, waiting for her time to come out. At that moment I realized that the love I knew began to disappear without saying goodbye. It left quietly, without slamming the door, without making a sound, like someone who steals something at night and doesn't want anyone to notice until the next day. At first, it was a small thing, something that a foolish man in love learns to ignore. She started putting on lipstick to go to the bakery. No big deal, I thought. Every woman has the right to dress up, and she always liked to feel pretty, but it was a new lipstick, a wine color, stronger than the ones she used to wear. A lipstick that left a mark on the glass, but never on my face. She said it was vanity, that she wanted to take better care of herself. And I smiled. I pretended I didn't feel that strange pang in my stomach every time she took a while to come back. Sometimes the bag would come back almost empty, a roll of bread, some milk, and the smell of a perfume I didn't recognize. Then came the cell phone. Ah, the cell phone. That damned device that seemed to have become her new confidant. She would spend hours staring at the screen with that smile on the corner of her mouth, a smile that wasn't meant for me, a smile that hurt more than a scream. And when I entered the room, she would hide it. She would put the device face down or leave, saying she needed to call her sister. One night, I heard her laughing alone in the bathroom. Laughing. Softly. A different kind of laugh. Almost like a teenager. And there I was, lying down with the TV remote in my hand, listening to that sound like someone listening to the end, approaching softly. We didn't talk like we used to. Her questions became automatic. Are you going to work today? Have you eaten? Did you bring bread? Short answers without looking into her eyes. And I pretended not to see, because seeing hurt more, because admitting that she was moving away was like opening a wound that I didn't know how to heal. One afternoon I saw her changing her phone plan, a new number. She said it was so she wouldn't be bothered by spam. I believed her, or wanted to believe her, because the fear of losing is like rust. It eats away slowly until the iron of faith turns to dust. She started going out more. She said she signed up for a course. Sewing this time. Or was it cooking? I don't even remember, to be honest, because the story changed, and I stopped asking questions, because those who ask too many questions end up hearing what they don't want to hear, and I didn't have the strength to listen. Not back then. Sometimes she would get messages at night. The light from her phone would illuminate her face in the darkness of the room, and I would pretend to sleep. Pretending became my new way of loving. Pretending I didn't see, pretending I didn't hear, pretending we were still the same. Even the smells had changed. The soap she used had a new scent, a sickly sweet one that didn't match the scent of my Madeleine. And the clothes I'd never seen before. Lace blouses, shorter skirts. She said she got them from her sister, but her sister lived far away, and I knew it. She looked at herself in the mirror with a vanity that she no longer shared with me. She put on lipstick, fixed her hair, grabbed her purse and said, "I'll be back soon." And she came back, colder, more distant, like someone who comes from a place where they were happy and returns to a place where they only fulfill their obligations. And me, I was still there, with dinner ready, with her glass full, with my heart in my hand. One night I sat on the edge of my bed and stared out the window. The street was quiet, just the sound of a cat walking across the rooftops, and I asked myself, does she still love me? But I didn't even have the courage to answer, because deep down, I already knew. The love I knew, the one that warmed our mornings and filled the house with laughter, was leaving, slowly, tiptoeing, taking with it the woman I loved and leaving in her place, a stranger with the same face, the same name, but with her eyes already turned in another direction. And the day came when I saw it with my own eyes. It was a Thursday, one of those grey days when the sky seems to want to cry in our place. I left work at the bakery early because the boss had taken my place at the oven. I had plans to stop by the pharmacy and buy some medicine for my back pain. But fate is a cruel beast. It draws traps with invisible lines, and we step on them thinking it's solid ground. I passed by the bar in the square, a simple place where the old men of the village played cards and drank cheap wine. It had never been her place. She said it smelled of mold and cigarettes. But that afternoon, as I put the coins in my coat pocket, I instinctively looked inside. Evie. I saw both of them, hand in hand. She, with that smile that I hadn't had for years. She laughed with her eyes, with her mouth, with her soul, the kind of laugh that we only let out when we forget that we once cried. And he looked like my son. Smooth face, neat beard, broad shoulders, white shirt puffed out like a rooster's chest. A young man, 40 at most, the age I had been when I built the house where she now slept with him. I stood still, outside. The wind was biting my face, but I didn't feel cold. My body went into a state of suspension as if time had paused, just to force me to see that scene, their hands touching, her eyes shining, the life I dreamed of being lived by someone else. She saw me, and then came what killed me inside. She wasn't scared. She didn't let go of his hand. He didn't try to hide anything. She just looked at me, like someone looking at a mistake from the past, like someone looking at an old painting that they've grown tired of looking at. She looked at me with a coldness that I never thought I would receive from the woman I loved, and he said, "You've already given what you had to give." It wasn't a scream, it wasn't a cry, it was just that, a phrase, a sentence, as if my entire life had become an expired product on a dusty shelf. I stood there, like a child lost in the middle of a market. You know that feeling you get when you lose your mother in the crowd, that feeling of anxiety in your stomach, that sudden loneliness, that was it, but multiplied by 40 years of love. She turned back to him. They continued their conversation, not an explanation, not a hesitation. I no longer existed, not as pain, not as a memory. I took 2 steps back, tripped on the curb, and almost fell. The world around me remained the same. People laughing, buses passing by, the church bell ringing in the distance, and I was dying there, inside, silent, because old men don't cry in public. They swallow their tears like they swallow their own name. I walked home in silence. Each step hurt like a blow. I remember the sound of the key turning in the lock, the door creaking, the kettle still hot on the stove. She had just left. Maybe she had even gone straight to the bar with him. I sat at the table. The tablecloth had crumbs from breakfast. Her glass was still half full. I stared at that glass for long minutes, like someone looking at a dead body, a remnant of a life that no one wanted to end. I didn't cry. I didn't break anything. I didn't make a fuss. I just felt such a huge emptiness that it felt like I had disappeared inside myself. She came back hours later. It was already night. I was in the same place. She came in, took off her coat, said good night as if she were talking to the baker on the corner, and went upstairs. I didn't answer, because I no longer had a voice. That night, I slept on the couch, not because of a fight, but because the bed was no longer mine. The house was no longer mine. And worst of all, it was never mine again. The next morning, after the bar, after the silence, after the cold venom of her indifference, I still thought that we could talk, that at least she owed me a decent explanation, that a man who spent 4 decades with a woman deserved at the very least to hear the truth, looking her in the eye. But no. What I received was a dry punch, not a closed hand, but with sharp words that cut me like a dull knife. I waited for her to come down. I sat on the edge of the kitchen chair like a teenager waiting to be scolded. The coffee was on the stove, but the smell no longer meant anything to me, nor did the sound of the cups on the shelf. It all seemed like a fake set from a play that had already ended. She appeared with that air of haste, as if she didn't want to be there. She leaned against the sink, crossed her arms, and just said, "Speak." He speaks, a word that in her mouth sounded like, "Just finish it." I tried to meet her eyes, but she looked away, cleaning the sink, fixing the cloth, pretending to be normal while my world was falling apart. I asked, "How long has this been going on?" She sighed impatiently. "What is this?" "The other one, you and him, since when?" She dropped the cloth. She looked at me with a contempt I never imagined I would see on that face. A look without pity, without pain, without the past. "You should thank me," she said. "Thank me for everything I put up with by your side, your whole life, your schedules, your lack of conversation, your quirks, your old man routine. I just kept quiet. Because you were good, but it was heavy. I got tired. I remained silent because I had nothing to say, because everything inside me was exploding inside, but my face remained still, hard. That was how I had learned to feel, in silence. She continued, "Now it's my turn, to live, to feel desired. I gave my best years to you, my 20s, my 30s, my 40s, and even my 50s. And what did I get? Silence, a clean house, but no dreams, no new love. Now I want more, and I won't. Apologize for it." I looked at her with a pain so deep it felt like it had sunk into her own body. I was no longer her husband. I was a closed chapter, a debt paid, a book she closed in anger for having wasted too much time reading. "So that's it?" I asked, almost in a whisper. "Is that what I am to you? A mistake?" She didn't answer. She just turned her back, picked up her bag, and left. She didn't slam the door. She didn't even look back. I stood there, alone in the kitchen. Coffee was bubbling, forgotten. The chair beside me was empty. The tablecloth was stained with wine from the night before, and the echo of the words she threw at my chest with the same contempt as someone throwing away an overcooked lunch. Ungrateful. She called me ungrateful. I, who gave up everything for her, who left Brazil to follow love, who worked twice as hard so she wouldn't have to leave home. I, who hid my back pain, who stopped telling her my dreams so as not to burden her. I, who celebrated her birthdays even when she forgot mine. I, who slept cold just to leave the blanket for her. I, who never asked for anything, nothing, except respect. I was called ungrateful. That morning, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything on the floor. I just sat and felt it. I felt it like someone who feels their body slowly sinking into the icy water of a lake. A slow drowning where no one comes to save you because they think you know how to swim. And maybe that was my mistake, appearing too strong. On the outside, a strong man. On the inside, only ruins. Crumbling slowly, without fanfare. That was the last time I tried to talk to her. After that, there was only silence. A silence that stayed in the house with us. And that spoke louder than any fight. I woke up before the sun. It was autumn in Normandy, and the cold was already beginning to seep through the cracks in the window like an omen. The house was quiet, as if it knew it would be empty in the morning. The wooden floor creaked slightly, and the smell of her coffee was no longer coming from anywhere, neither the smell nor her. She had gone out the night before. She had simply said, "I'm going to Claire's," but she hadn't even bothered to lie well. She didn't need to. When the truth becomes clear, disrespect can no longer be hidden. She knew I knew, and I no longer had the strength to confront her. I just wanted to leave without falling apart again. I got up, took a cold shower. I put on my clothes slowly, a starched white shirt, the same one I wore when we bought that house. I put on my shoes like someone getting ready for their own funeral. I grabbed the leather suitcase, the old one, that still smelled of being stored and of longing, and I started to fit in there, piece by piece, what was left of me. I didn't take much. A change of clothes, my medicine, the box with the notes she left me in the early years. Yes, I still had it. I never had the courage to tear it up. And the ring, the one I swore I wouldn't take off my finger as long as I breathed, stayed there, alone, on the kitchen table. No box, no note, no goodbye. I approached the dog, old Gaston, the only one in that house who still looked at me as if I mattered. I scratched him behind the ear, and he licked my hand with that sad look of an animal that knows. Animals always know. I hugged him tightly and whispered, "Take care of the house for me, or take care of her. I don't know." He lowered his head, as if he understood more than any human. I didn't slam the door. I didn't look back. I didn't leave a letter. I only left the sound of my absence. The street was wet from the light rain that had fallen during the early morning. The sky was a dirty grey, heavy, just like my shoulders, and each step I took on that stone sidewalk was like dragging myself along, a burial without a coffin, an end without witnesses. I carried my bag in one hand and my broken chest in the other, because yes, the heart weighs too, And mine no longer had room for tears, not because I didn't want to cry, but because the tears had dried up. Scream. Why? Who listens to an old man? Who listens to a man who spent his life swallowing what he felt? I didn't leave out of cowardice. I went out of respect. Respect for everything we've been. For the silent lunches, the forgotten birthdays, the promises that withered like flowers without water. I went because to continue there would be to become a shadow. And even a shadow gets tired of following someone who can no longer see it. Sometimes an old man's silence screams louder than any scandal. And mine screamed in that hallway. It screamed in the creaking of the door, in the empty echo of the room, in the breadcrumbs she left on the towel, and that for the first time I didn't clean up. I got into the taxi that was waiting for me outside. The driver didn't say anything, neither did I. I just told him the address. A room in the back of Mr. Antoine's bakery. It was far enough away that she would never see me by chance. It was small enough to fit only someone who no longer wanted to take up space. On the way, I looked out the window. The streets I had known for decades seemed different, colder, faster, more foreign. Or maybe it was just that I no longer felt like I belonged anywhere. Because home is not where you live. It's where you are remembered. And there, in that house, my name was no longer a memory. It was uncomfortable. I lived in a small room at the back of Mr. Antoine's bakery. Just one room, a single bed, a small sink, a closet that smelled of damp wood, and a window that looked out onto the neighbor's brick wall. There was no view. There were no luxuries. But there was silence. And for the first time in many years, that silence was mine. In the early days, it was strange to wake up without hearing the kettle buzzing, without hearing footsteps upstairs, without having someone to make coffee for, without having to ask, "Do you want your bread extra toasted today?" The silence was heavy, but it was a different weight from the one I had carried before. It was a silence of mourning, but also of liberation. I tried to keep my mind occupied. I woke up early, walked to the market, and bought only what I needed. I started cooking again. And look, I didn't even remember that I knew how. But my calloused hands still remembered how to season rice, how to chop onions without crying, or sometimes crying, but not because of the onion. I started writing letters to myself, letters that I never sent, letters that began with "Dear Geraldo" and ended with "Stay strong, my friend." I wrote as if I were dumping a weight on paper. I talked about what hurt, what I missed, what made me angry. I confessed everything I never had the courage to say out loud, including that, for a long time, I had ceased to exist within myself, trying to be the ideal man for someone who no longer saw me. And it was by writing that I began to remember who I was, before I was just a husband. I remembered that I liked to read. I would pick up old books from the second-hand bookstore on the corner, read them slowly, going back through paragraphs as if savoring the word. I started listening to music on the battery-powered radio again, songs that she said were too old. But for me, they still smelled of youth. In the late afternoons, I would sit on the sidewalk and watch the city breathe, the cars passing by, the couples arguing. Quietly, the children running after balls. No one knew who I was. No one expected anything from me, and strangely enough, that gave me peace. I started cutting my own hair. I started choosing my clothes carefully, even if no one would see. I bought a blue mug just for me. I cooked for myself, set the table, and put a napkin next to my plate, because I learned that we deserve care too, even when no one else cares for us. It wasn't happiness. It was reconstruction, plank by plank, with a hammer, of longing and nails of silence. But slowly I began to smile, sometimes alone, reading a sentence in a book, sometimes in the morning when the sun hit the wall and left a beautiful drawing that seemed to say to me, "You're still here." Mr. Antoine would invite me to have coffee. He didn't talk much, but he listened a lot. Once he said, "Do you know what I admire most about you, Geraldo? It's that even after everything, you still make the bed." I laughed. But he was right. Making the bed, for me, became a way of telling the world that I hadn't given up, that despite the pain I still deserved order, I deserved comfort, I deserved to start over. And it was there, in that small room with no view, that I began to see better. It had been almost 4 years since I had left that house without knocking, 4 winters spent with coffee brewed by myself, birthdays forgotten by everyone, letters written in silence and kept in the drawer. 4 years in which I learned to live alone, and, the hardest part, to respect myself. Life, over time, makes the pain less painful. It doesn't go away, no, but it stays there, quiet, like a deep scar. Sometimes it itches, sometimes it burns, but almost always you only remember it when you run your finger over it. And I almost never ran it over it anymore, until she showed up. It was a cloudy afternoon, like all the others in Normandy. I was sitting in front of the little room, listening to Mr. Antoine's old radio, when I saw a familiar figure coming down the alley, staggering, wearing the coat I had once bought myself. He walked more slowly. His hair, which had been dyed, now showed white strands around his forehead. His heels no longer made a sound of firmness, only of hesitation. Madeleine. Her name still hurt inside like a buried thorn. But when I saw her, I didn't feel anger. I felt pity, and then a strange emptiness, like someone who finds an old book that was once their favorite, but now the pages are stained, wet, unrecognizable. It's still the same book, but you're no longer the same reader. She stopped in front of me, her eyes full of tears, and her mouth trembling, as if she didn't know whether to apologize or ask permission. I remained silent. I looked at her, waiting, because after all, it's not me who needs an explanation. "Geraldo," she began in a whisper, "I needed to see you." I didn't say anything. I was left alone. He left. He said he was too young to live with me, that he wanted children, adventures. I was left with nothing. He remained silent. She took a deep breath, as if she needed courage to be small in front of me. "I thought you were suffocating me, but you were the one keeping me alive. I miss you." I looked at the ground. The dry autumn leaves were spinning at our feet. It looked like a scene from a sad movie. But the truth is that standing there in front of her, I felt light, because I no longer needed her love. I had already healed from a wound that she didn't even know she had left. "Could we talk? Have coffee? Just talk." Her voice was soft, almost humble, but it was too late. Not because I wanted revenge, I'm not a man for revenge, but because I finally understood that dignity cannot be exchanged for company, nor for longing. I looked into her eyes, the same eyes that once made me smile, that later ignored me, that saw me cry and chose to turn away, and I spoke calmly, without resentment, but with all the truth that lived within me. "You lost me when you thought I was disposable." She looked down. She wanted to take my hand, but I pulled away, not out of anger, out of respect for me. "I don't know what to do now," she said, almost in a whisper. I took a deep breath. The sky was beginning to darken. The first drops of light rain fell on the cement, like tears that weren't mine. "I know," I replied. "Now you're going to have to live with the choice you made, just like I lived with the consequences of it." She turned away, slowly, as if the words had broken something inside her, and I stood there, firm, standing, whole. When she disappeared around the corner, I went back inside. I heated my coffee, I picked up a book, and I smiled to myself, because the past can even come back, but we learn not to let him in again. And I finally understood that I was not ungrateful. That word echoed inside me for years, like a thunderclap stuck in my chest. She said it so coldly, so surely, as if everything I did, everything I gave, everything I endured had been an obligation, as if loving was a debt I never paid off. But no, I'm not ungrateful. I'm just tired. I'm tired of being good to people who have never seen me, of giving myself to the bone and still being called a burden. of spending a lifetime trying to deserve what deep down was already mine by right, respect, a look, a care, a word in return. Today, after everything, after the pain, the silence, the humiliation, the departure, today I understand. We spend our lives trying to be enough for someone else, trying to fit in, trying to keep a castle made of promises standing, even when the stones have turned to dust. We endure, swallow, pretend, endure, all in the name of a love that sometimes only we feel. And when we wake up, we realize that we lost ourselves in the process. I lost. You're wasting your time. I lost my youth. I missed birthdays, dreams, conversations with myself. I was a father, husband, provider, counselor, nurse, listener, bricklayer, of feelings. And in return, I received the label of ungrateful, as if loving was not enough, as if being present meant nothing. But life, oh, life teaches, and it teaches slowly, in the way that hurts the most, through abandonment, through contempt, through the look that no longer recognizes you. And it is there, at the bottom of the well, that you learn to build your own ground. I built it. Day after day, I resurrected an old Geraldo that I had buried back then, when I decided to be everything, to someone who no longer saw value in me. I rediscovered my hands, my voice, my tastes, my time. I rediscovered the pleasure of making a coffee just for myself, of making the bed knowing that no one will see, of reading a book without needing to be interrupted. And most importantly, I learned to look at myself in the mirror and say, "You deserve it." Because the truth is this: true love is the kind that begins with ourselves. The rest is a compliment. It is a gift, never a payment. When we love ourselves, no one has the power to reduce us. When we respect ourselves, no one labels us without us returning the label. Today, I sleep in peace, in my simple little room, with the window facing a wall, because what I see now does not depend on the view. It depends on me. I close my eyes without weight, because I no longer owe anything. Not apologies, not explanations, not to myself, not to her. She went, then she came back. But I was no longer there. I was whole within myself. No one can take that away. So for those who are listening to me now, for you who stayed until the end of this story, I say, never wait for others to value you to know your worth. Never accept the label that is thrown at you with disdain. You are not what they tell you. You are what survives inside you, even after everything. I'm not ungrateful. I just stopped being invisible. And sometimes we only start living after we stop asking to be loved. Telling you this hurt, but it hurt even more to hide it for so long. I didn't know if I would ever have the courage, but you listened to me until the end, and that changes everything for me. There are things that we carry in silence for so long, that when we finally let it out, it doesn't turn into relief. It turns into contained tears. It turns into breathing silence. I spoke with a trembling heart, but I spoke. And now I feel like I'm no longer alone in this story. If any part of what I experienced touched you, if any phrase reminded you of something that hurt, comment here with the word true, because that's what I've been missing for so many years. And maybe it's what you're missing too. Leave your like, follow the channel. Maybe someone else needs to hear this. Someone who has been silent for too long. Someone who just wants to be heard, like I was now. And if this already hurt you, get ready, because the next story is even crueler. A cruelty that came from someone dear. This confession is a story of pain, abandonment, and betrayal. It will make you tears and also teach you the importance of valuing yourself above all. Click on the video that is appearing on the screen and come with me.